If you enjoy the video or any other content on the channel, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. Alright, and this video is just going to be going over the Auric Champions Detachment, just what it does, and the list I've built, and the synergy with the detachments and the units I've chosen to put in this list. For the Auric Champions, the detachment ability is called Assemblage of Might. At the start of your command phase, you select one enemy unit, and then until your next command phase, any of your Custodes characters get +1 to wound against that target. And that's in your shooting and in your melee, but it's mostly the melee that really is important. And it's only Custodes models only, so that is the big kicker with them. It's not the units, only the models. So I like the detachment. It sounds interesting and thematic, but in practice, you're not getting a lot of benefit from it. You're only getting maybe a couple characters per round that are going to benefit from this, and the rest of your army is not getting anything from it. So I really like the sound of it. It's kind of cool. It makes your characters really feel like big champions, but other than that, the rest of your army is really not benefiting anything from the detachment. So now let's go over the enhancements. So the enhancements, they may look familiar because they are the enhancements from the Index Shield House. So we have a Veiled Blade again, add 2 attacks to the Bearer's model. 25 points is great on the Blade Champion because you're going to get the 2 more attacks on the Blade Champion. You're going to be hunting for the devastating wounds, and one of the stratagems that we're going to go over really makes this guy, his damage go through the roof. We have Sleepless Hunter, the one where you can fall back and charge, and then once per game you can do a reactive up to 6-inch movement if someone falls back, moves, or advances within 9 inches of that unit. And this is probably one of the best enhancements in the detachment, if not the codex. This is really amazing, just to be able to fall back and charge in that reactive move. Since we don't have a lot of movement in our codex and just in the data sheets, the reactive movement is awesome. Those stratagems are next. So the stratagems are hit and miss just because they are only characters models. Once again, you cannot use them on your character unit. It has to be a Custodes character model. So it really brings the utility of these stratagems down. There is some strong ones, and I'll go over the ones I used the most and I felt that were the strongest, and then I'll go over the ones that I felt were, nigh useless, or I didn't even use them the entire game. And then Slayer of Champions is one of the better ones that you can, so after you've killed your Assemblage of Might target, you can select a new one. So it's great for kind of comboing your characters and getting a few more chances to interact with that detachment rule with your characters. And then you have Emperor's Auspice, and this one is amazing just because we don't have any kind of devastating wounds protection anymore. So for 1 CP, you have a 4 funeral pain, and that could be in your shooting or the melee. It's Epic Deed like all the stratagems in this list. That's the sad thing about this detachment. Every stratagem is not a battle tactic. It's not one. Everything's either Epic Deed or Strategic Ploy or something like that. So your big shield captain's ability, you can use it for re-rolling a charge or something like that. It really takes the window of the sails not being able to use any of these stratagems for free, because some of them are pretty tasty and just some of them are so expensive that you just are never going to use because they're so expensive. So these are 2 of the more used ones, and I have a couple more that I think are quite good and a couple that are kind of garbage. And to finish the really good stratagems for this detachment, earning a name. This one can be amazing. It really depends on the list that you're fighting. You select up to 2 characters in the fight phase, and those characters can re-roll their hits and their wounds against a monster and vehicles. So like I said, it depends on the list you're facing. If there's lots of monsters and vehicles, you can really get some good damage. So this is the stratagem I talked about. So if you put it with the Blade Champion and the +1 to wound, you re-roll your hits and your wounds, and then with Veiled Blades, you're fishing for the sustained hits, and then you're fishing for devastating wounds. So this guy can really crank out some damage, but you do have to set it up. So this one can be amazing. You pop it on Trajan, you pop it on your Blade Champion at the same time, and both of those guys can re-roll their hits and wounds. You use Moment Shackle with Trajan and really pump out some damage. But like I said, it does require some setup, and you do have to be using it against monsters or vehicles. Infantry units, it's not going to work on. These are going to be the stratagems that I didn't use, or I didn't have the CP, or just didn't really see the use of the stratagem. Superhuman Reserves can be an amazing stratagem if you have the CP. So you want to use it on Trajan because it has to be your warlord. and Trajan's the only one you really want to spend 2 CP to reset your once per game ability for 2 CP, and you have to use it when you use the ability, so that makes it kind of hard. You can't, use it and then later on go, I got 2 CP, so I'm going to see if I can crank out Trajan's Moment Shackle again. You have to use it when you're using Moment Shackle, so if you don't have the CP, you can't use it. And all it does is just resets your once per game ability, so you want to use it with Trajan, of course, just to reset his 12 attacks. Really, I would almost say this would be one of the stratagems is why Trajan was nerfed, because if you could fight first twice with Trajan, it would make him quite broken. I would rather throw this stratagem away and keep my fights first, at least keep the ignore modifiers for Trajans. So sounds like a great stratagem, but for the cost and the hoops you have to kind of go through to be able to use it, I just think it's too expensive and it's too situational that you're not going to really use it as much as you would like to use it. Alright, so on to the last two stratagems. So these ones I didn't use at all. I didn't see a use to use them, and I think they're kind of useless. There may be Shoulder the Mantle, there could be some play with there. So Shoulder the Mantle is for 1 CP, one of your characters that's not in a unit can join a unit that would usually be able to join with the unit composition. So a shield captain could join some wardens if they didn't have a character model in there. There's not a lot. You can do a few tricks. You can maybe have a blade champion 6 inches away from a target, deep strike wardens or your custodian guard 9 inches away, and then use a stratagem to add the blade champion to it so you can make your deep striking charge 6 inches instead. But for that kind of setup, it's not really worth it, really, because you're going to be running a lot of your characters solo, or if they are not running solo, they're already going to have a unit to be joined into. So once again, this really wasn't a useful stratagem. It's not going to be used all that much. Like I said, there is some tricks you could do with it, but it's probably not worth doing it for the setup. Then you also have one of the most useless, if the not most useless stratagem in the game. I mean, it's not useless, but man, you're not going to use it. Vigilant Ending for 2 CP. One of your Custodes characters can fight on death. 2 CP is quite expensive for a fight on death for one single model. Like I said, if this was a battle tactic, it'd be awesome because you're like, I'll use this for free, and why not? But having a epic deed so you can't use it for free, you're not going to spend 2 CP on this. I'd rather save the 2 CP and use it on superhuman reserves than this. So like I said, one of the most useless, if not the most useless stratagems in our codex, if not the game, because you're not going to use this. Like it could be cool, but it's just for 2 CP for one model. Fight on death's just not worth it. So let's get into the list. So the list I have I'm going to be using this in a battle report. The battle report's going to be coming out later on this week. With the only change is I do have an inspirational exemplar instead of Unstoppable Destroyer in the battle report. This list comes to 1995. We're using the Field Minotaurums, so the latest data slate points, and luckily the enhancements are all the same as the index enhancements, so I can use those points. I have Trajan Valoris, I have a Blade Champion. The Blade Champion and Trajan Valoris are going to be running with the 2 groups of 4 Wardens. Blade Champion has Veil Blade, then I have a Shield Captain and Terminator Armor, and I just gave him the axe to try it out, and he has the Ceaseless Hunter, so he can fall back and charge and do the reactive movement, and he's going to be running with 2 Terminators with Spears. Then I have the Shield Captain on Jetbike with the Unstoppable Destroyer, and then I also have another Shield Captain on Jetbike. Finally, rounding out all my characters, I have Kyria Draxus with 4 Custodian Guard that she's going to be going with. And then I have 2 Caladius Grav Tanks with heavy blaze cannons just to give me a little bit of long-range firepower because I don't have the same staying power with the no protection against devastating wounds or mortal wounds, so I want to have something to threaten the opponent's shooting so they're not just staying on all game shooting at my infantry. So this is the list. It comes to 1995, and it's the Auric Champions, so it's your characters get +1 to wound against your assemblage of might. Your characters here will all get a +1 to wound against it, except for Draxus because she's not a custodian unit. So in my list videos, I like to kind of separate my units into kind of jobs from categories. They're not always going to be doing these things, but just so I have an idea when I'm playing the game, I can kind of go ahead with my game plan. I don't get stuck into what the opponent's going to do. Everyone kind of has a job, so I can keep to that game plan and not get frazzled by what the opponent's bringing. So usually I have some attack units, just units that I usually use to focus down the opponent's most dangerous units or just their objective scoring units. Use these guys. They're a little more expendable than everyone else, but you got to use them sparingly still because you're custodians. But yes, these guys are going to be used for taking out the units that you need to win the game with. Then you have the primary units. So these primary units are just going to be used for standing on the primary objectives, getting you primary points as much as you can. We aren't as tough and tanky as we used to, so we can't just stand on there with wardens and just pray for the best. We got to use a little bit of caginess, but I do like to have some units that I dedicate to just trying to get me primary points. And then last, I have the secondary units. So these units are used for getting me secondary points and just investigate signals if I have to or something like that, just for running around getting me little side secondary points, as well as disrupting the opponent's army, getting in the way, gumming things up, taking out infantry or lone operatives. These ones again are a little more expendable than my primary units, but still you do have to be careful with all the units. You don't want to throw these away for nothing. These are going to be the attack units in this specific list. So I have the Blade Champion with the Veil Blade and the 4 Wardens. They're going to start the game in Deep Strike just so I can try to rapid ingress and target down the opponent's units that I really want to take out with him. You also using earning the name if they have a monster or a vehicle you need to get rid of. This can really make this guy chunk out some good damage. You put the assemblage of mice, you get +1 to wound, veil blades, so you get 7 attacks with that devastating wounds profile. Rerolling your hits and your wounds, you're really going to pump up some damage. And then you have those Custodes grav tanks just for some big potential damage from those blaze cannons. It just allows you with a little bit of long-range firepower that usually an infantry-heavy list that isn't going to have, because you don't have a lot of units. They're smaller units in this list. Gives them some firepower, so you don't have to worry about the enemy just placing all their big guns right out in range, ready to shoot you off the board. They have to be a little more conservative when they're placing their own shooting units. So I do like to have some grav tanks in this attachment. It seems almost mandatory, sadly. We don't like saying that just because we hate all having to try to get a bunch of Forge World stuff. You could use Land Raiders, which would be kind of cool because you could pile a bunch of different characters in a Land Raider and drive that off the board. You don't get the big reroll damage from the grav tanks, but you still get those hitting on 2 Godhammer las cannons. And I think that using the Land Raiders could be a decent pick instead of the grav tanks if you needed to, if you didn't have any access to the grav tanks. Good, so if you want to try a little bit of armor in this detachment. Next, we have our primary units. So in our primary units from this list, we're going to have Trajan Valoris with his 4 wardens. He's still great for having on the middle objective. People still don't really want to get close to him because you can crank out those 12 attacks with the Moment Shackle, and I like having Trajan with some wardens just to have a little bit of cushion of damage with him because the 4 Fuel and Pain, so it allows Trajan to possibly use that superhuman reserves to get a second round of Moment Shackle. Just him by himself, I think it'd be a little harder to get the superhuman reserves and have him not killed before he could use it again, so having the wardens gives him a little bit of cushion around him. We also have the Shield Captain with the Unstoppable Destroyer. You can use either one of the Shield Captains for this. It depends on which objective's closer, what happens. Maybe there's a secondary closer. And this is just a fast unit just to run up and grab your objective closest to your deployment zone, so you don't have as much threat on him getting killed. He's a great target for the 4 Feel No Pain. He's just a single unit. It's a lot harder to kill these guys. You can soak up a lot of damage with the 4 Feel No Pain. Finally, you have Kyria Draxus. Draxus is joined with a 4 Custodian Guard, just so you can give that reroll to wounds if you control the objective in the double tap. And the 18-inch lone op can come in handy for this list, just so it allows you to stay on the home field objective if you need to, without having to worry about a bunch of withering firepower bombing you off that objective. People want to come take you off it. And then our anti-infantry devastating wounds gun really helps with these Custodian Guards with the shooting. She's great for shooting into the midfield. She has a great sustained hits psychic attack, so with the Custodian Guard re-rolling her wounds, you can really pump out some good anti-infantry damage with her, and even the Custodian Guards get to shoot as well. But sadly, she doesn't have access to any of the stratagems because she isn't an Adeptus Custodes character. Finally, to round out the jobs categories, we have our secondary units. So these are the units getting for secondary scoring and just for harrying the opponent's army. You can use one of the shield captains on jetbikes. Like I said, it can be either one. I like to use the one with no enhancements, so he's a little more expendable than the more pricey one with the Unstoppable Destroyer. But either way, if points come up for points, you grab points with them. And they're real speedy. They're great for investigating signals because you don't have to worry about being stuck in the corners forever. You can get down in the corners and then get out again with the Terminators. You get down a corner. If you don't have golden light, you're stuck there for a while. So once again, another great target for the Feel No Pain stratagem. 1 CP just to make these guys real tanky, running around grabbing secondaries and just taking out lone operatives and attacking some infantry. And then we have the Shield Captain and Terminator armor with the Ceaseless Hunter. You can also use this as an attack unit, but I like to use this to drop in behind enemy lines, drop in a corner for investigating signals if I have to, as long as I still have access to golden light. So they're great for dropping down, taking care of a threat, and then popping back up and going somewhere else on the board. And now that it's strategic reserves, instead of coming down the next turn, you can bring them up and just decide to, maybe I'll hold on to this next turn, just to give that threat to the opponent that you could rapid ingress these things back down on someone's head. Maybe having a bunch of just single ones, just because you can use that new ability of making all damage 1 for a phase. I think this is a great unit. I think Shield Captains and Terminator have a lot of play in this detachment. My final thoughts on the detachment. Like I said, I think it's thematic. I think it's fun. I can see what they were trying to do with it, but with it only working on a very few models on the board, with only being the +1 against one selected unit, you really kind of feel like you're almost playing with no detachment, really, just because you really only get to play with it with 1 or 2 models per battle round, per phase. If you can get some shooting, if you get some melee, you might even not even get either. So I do believe it kind of takes a little bit of the fun of having a new detachment if you're only getting a few models on the board, kind of getting any kind of benefit from it. Now that I've played with it, I played a few games. I played a couple of practice games. I played a couple of games that we're going to have on the channel. So after playing this one, I do believe this is probably going to be the next one up past Null Maiden. So I don't know which is going to be best between Shield Host and Revered Companions. There still could be a little bit of magic in this detachment. Like I said, this is my favorite detachment. I love the feel of it. I love the idea of it. So I do want to see if I can make it work. Even if, you know, I might lose a few more games I would if I was using Shield Host or something like that. I think this is the detachment I want to try to make work. We are going to be having some more overviews of each of the detachments. I even might have enough sisters to run the Null Maidens, but we'll see about that. That'll probably be the last one I run. So I think Revered Companions might be next. It could be Shield Host, but I'm pretty sure Revered Companions will be next. So we'll have a list overview of that one, and then we'll have a battle report 2,000 points using that list against someone on the channel. So we'll get to see which one of all these detachments is the best and which one's the worst. I'm rooting for Null Maidens for the worst because I do believe I might have enough sisters that I can probably run most of these sisters. I may have to run something to help them on the side, but I do have probably around 60 sisters I can throw in there to try to make a list out of. Stay around, stay tuned. We'll see which one of the detachments is the best. And like I said, I'm going to run Auric Champions at the end, I do believe, just because I like the feel of it. I think Shield Host could be pretty fun too with the Golden Wah. Stick around and we'll see what we can make work. Once the points come out, we'll have a new list showing off, you know, what we can do with the points. And like I always say, thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by.